2, 1.
All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Reva Ramadori, and I'm the director of the Thermo Fisher Scientific Junior Innovators Challenge, and I'm here with my colleague, Alex Grace. And we are so glad that you could join us for today's webinar. Alex and I run the Thermo Fisher JIC competition. You might have heard from us already throughout the spring, encouraging you to encourage your nominees to apply. And you were invited to this webinar today because you have at least one student that's been nominated to apply to the national competition this year. We have a mix of teachers joining us today or tuning in today. And whether you know the competition really well and have had several nominees in the past, or students make it, to the top 300 or finalist level, or whether you've never heard of the competition before and this is your first time learning more about it, we hope that you walk away from today's webinar with a few tips and tools to help support your students through the application process. We know that teachers play a really vital role in motivating their students to apply and just giving them the confidence to try. So we thank you for taking the time to be here and for being such a pivotal player in your student success.
If you have any questions today, feel free to type them into the live chat box on the right-hand side of the screen. We'll answer questions at the end, and you can always email us at jic@societyforscience.org at any time. This session is also being recorded and will be on our YouTube page, so you can look back on it, and other teachers who cannot join us today can also hear this information.
All right, so we'll jump right into things. Since most teachers that signed up for today's webinar indicated that they either are somewhat familiar with the competition or haven't heard of it at all, we're going to start with just a little basic overview about what the competition is and who we are at the Society for Science and also Thermo Fisher Scientific. So that. All right. So what is the Thermo Fisher JIC? This competition is the nation's premier STEM research competition for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students. It was known as the Broadcom Masters from 2011 to 2022, so you might be familiar with it under that name. And also prior to that, the Discovery Channel Young Scientists Challenge from 1999 to 2007. So the gist of it, to qualify for the national competition, students must first place within the top 10% of a Society for Science affiliated fair. And ultimately, after the application process, 30 finalists are invited to spend a week in Washington, D.C., showcasing their research projects and competing in hands-on STEM challenges as teams. And we'll talk more about finals week and what it means to be a finalist in just a little bit.
The Society is a nonprofit dedicated to expanding scientific literacy, effective STEM education, and scientific research. The Society's vision is to promote the understanding and appreciation of science and the vital role it plays in human advancement, to inform, educate, and inspire. The Society does this by hosting science competitions and publishing science news, an award-winning flagship magazine with the most important science news from all fields and applications of science and technology. Science News Explorers is the Society's award-winning publication dedicated to students, parents, and teachers, and used by nearly 4 million visitors each year. In addition to Thermo Fisher JIC, the Society runs 2 high school STEM competitions: the Regeneron International Science and Engineering Fair, which is the world's largest international high school science competition, and the Regeneron Science Talent Search, which is the nation's oldest and most prestigious STEM competition for high school seniors. Thermo Fisher JIC is made possible by our friends and sponsor, Thermo Fisher Scientific. Thermo Fisher is committed to nurturing generations of STEM professionals that more fully reflect our society and embrace their diverse perspectives and ideas to fuel innovation, advance science, and solve the world's most complex problems. All right, so here is sort of the steps your students would follow to become a Thermo Fisher finalist. Thermo Fisher JIC finalist. The first thing a student has to do to be considered for the Thermo Fisher JIC competition is to complete a science or engineering project. Then they must enter their project into a society-affiliated science and engineering fair. The next step is to receive a Thermo Fisher JIC nomination by placing in the top 10% of projects at the fair, which your students have already done.
The next big step is to complete and submit the online application by June 12th, 2024 at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And if your student has not already opened an application, and if you want to check it out yourself, you can go to this link right here, and we'll talk more about the application in a bit as well. So once your student has applied, they are in the running to be one of the top 300 junior innovators. And from those top 300, the judges select 30 finalists. There's no additional round of anything that your student has to do between the top 330 finalist phase. Once the application is in, they're good to go. So those 30 finalists are invited to finals week of the competition here in Washington, D.C. During finals week, they will showcase their research project and also participate in those team challenges that I mentioned. So just to talk about each of those stages a little bit more and really just give you more context about what that means for your student should they apply. Like we mentioned, the nominee level, which your students are at right now, is the top 10% of sixth through eighth graders at their local science fair. So nominees place at their top 10%. And the fair we give the fair a suggested rubric for judging those projects. The nominees should receive a packet of information from their fair via email, and they are encouraged to apply online. That's what you must have received a ton of emails from us already encouraging you to help your students through the process, and we send emails to their parents and guardians as well. We definitely encourage you to open those emails from us each week, or at least a couple times a month. You're going to get an email that has different resources that you can then pass along to your student, and we hope that they use to help them through the application process. The next level is called the entrant level. So after a nominee completes and submits an application by the deadline, they are considered an entrant. So we have roughly 2,000 entrants per year. That number has fluctuated a bit pre and post pandemic, but we're around that mark right now, maybe just under it. Once a student becomes an entrant, we have special opportunities for them as alumni. They can join our alumni network, and they are invited to alumni events that we host at the society as well. We really try to encourage students at every step of the way of the competition. So we want them to know that it's a huge accomplishment, not just to be nominated, but to enter. And so that's why we have them join the society's alumni network. We mail out a prize package with a t-shirt in the summertime once they completed an application, and those entrants are also entered into a lottery to win other prizes like digital microscopes, Arduinos, things that might help them with future research projects. After a student enters their application into the competition, the next level is the top 300 junior innovators. So the top 300 are going to be announced on September 4th this year. Those students receive $125 courtesy of DoD STEM, also get another special prize package. And then you as a teacher, if you have a top 300 student, will also get a prize package, as well as a subscription to Science News Explorers magazine, which is one of the publications Alex mentioned that the society produces. And so you will get a print copy for a whole year, which is a great resource to help project ideation and help get students involved in the front end of their research projects, maybe in the start of your school year. Our last phase is the finalist phase. The finalists are going to be announced on September 18th this year. And this is a all expenses paid trip that the students win for themselves and one parent or guardian. There are $500 awarded to each finalist. Each finalist school gets $1,000 to use on STEM initiatives and activities. But really the real prize is just being a part of that group and getting to getting to experience all that we do here in DC together for a week. So more about what it kind of means to be a finalist. Um, and also, I should mention that this year, finals week will be in October, towards the end of October, the 25th through the 30th. We'll have dates at the end of the slideshow as well. So like I mentioned, students participate in team challenges. They present research, and we do a whole slew of other activities throughout the week as well. We'll connect them with alumni. We have evening activities. And the biggest takeaway that we hear from finalists each year is that the experience was so special to them, not for the prizes that are available at the end of the week, but for meeting other students that are just like them from all over the country that have the same passion for science, engineering, technology, math that they do. And it's finalists walk away with friends for life, which is always great to hear. Just to give you an idea of the awards that are available, there are quite a few at the finalist level. Our top award is the $25,000 Thermo Fisher Scientific Ascend Award, Aspiring Scientists Cultivating Exciting New Discoveries. We have a slew of $10,000 awards as well that are sponsored by different organizations. We have first and second place awards in each of the 4 STEM categories, and these are awards that come with an iPad and then a stipend to attend a STEM summer camp of the winner's choosing. We also have a team award sponsored by Ties that is a gift card to a science supply company to support, again, their for future scientific research. I'm actually going to backtrack a second just to talk a little bit more about finals week and the team challenges and judging, because there are obviously, in addition to the research project, which you all are familiar with, that your students have done, finals week really goes beyond that. And the judges observe the students working on these team challenges together. So the research project, what we say is kind of from the beginning to the end of the competition, the research project gets them in, right? It's what they do to earn a nomination. The application really highlights the research project, and you'll see that in a bit. But it starts to go beyond that a little bit. We have some creative essays as well that the judges take into consideration when they're reviewing an application. And then ultimately in finals week, the first day is devoted to judging their research projects. We kind of have a typical science fair set up, and students take part in judging panel interviews. So they'll talk to judges in depth about their research projects. But then the next 2 days, and really the bulk of finals week, are taken up by these team challenges. And so the challenges cover a variety of different STEM subjects. And what the judges are looking for during finals week and during those team challenges really are how the students display different, 21st century skills like creative thinking, problem solving, teamwork, leadership. So it's okay if a student doesn't have a strong background in a particular area that, the challenge might be highlighting. They can still demonstrate some really unique problem solving skills and creative ideas. Similarly, if a student is an expert in the subject matter of a particular challenge, that doesn't mean that they're going to automatically be a top winner or performer. They really have to work on involving their whole team if not everyone kind of knows that subject. It's really about teamwork. We want to make sure that students, know and understand at a young age that collaboration is a huge part of STEM and scientific research. And so that's a good part of judging during finals week of the competition. So now talking a little bit more about eligibility, rules, science fair paperwork. These are all things that we want to cover, and we'll point out ways that you can help your students kind of throughout the way in terms of their completing the application and science fair paperwork in particular. So in terms of eligibility, well, all of our affiliated fairs that your students have already participated in do abide by our rules and guidelines. So your students should be eligible, but just to give a little bit of a recap, A student has to first place in a society affiliated fair at their top 10% and earn a nomination to apply online to the competition. They must be in grades 6 through 8 at the time that they earn that nomination. Because finals week ultimately takes place in the next academic year, we know that some of those students will go on and be in high school by the time they actually come to finals week. That's perfectly fine as long as they got the nomination when they were in 6th, 7th, or 8th grade. Team projects are eligible for the competition. A maximum of 3 members can be on each of those teams. However, each team member is evaluated independently, and that means that each team member of a team project has to complete and submit their own application. This is because, like I mentioned before, the application goes beyond their research project. So because it's really assessing the student at an individual level, they have to answer the questions individually. But all team members do not need to apply. If a whole team of 3 was nominated to apply to the competition, but only 1 or 2 of those students want to actually enter, that's totally fine. The third person or the other 2 members of the team are not required to enter for just 1 student to be eligible or to make it further in the competition. They do have to enter the competition with the same project that earned them the nomination. So that means that a student, if they earned their nomination in February, but might have expanded on their research project already between February and June when they submit their application, the student shouldn't be including additional information or changing their project at all in terms of what they're submitting in the application. They can enter or they can include more data if they're doing the same sort of methodology, just conducting trials and gathering more data of the same thing. That's totally fine. What we don't want is an entirely new project coming to the board after the student competed at their local fair. The student their research should have just a maximum of 1 year's research. And finalists are not eligible to re-enter the competition if they won any one of those awards on the previous page other than the team award. So any of the STEM prizes or top awards. And we just want to try to spread the wealth a little bit with students applying. And that's why we have that rule. So moving on to some of our rules for research. We have rules in place for conducting different types of research, all primarily with the goal in mind of making sure students are being safe and acting ethically. So all affiliated fairs agree to enforce the Regeneron ISEF rules and guidelines at the middle school level. But we know that at the middle school level, that can be sometimes hard to do. Many fairs might even have some stricter rules than we do, just to make sure their students are being really safe. But at this stage, your student should have already gone through their local affiliated fair and have had their project reviewed for safety. If you're not sure whether they did, we'll talk about some options for your student in terms of what to do for the application so that you can help them through submitting. And here's a link for our full ISEF rules and guidelines, which I do recommend you take a look at, particularly before a student starts their research, maybe next year if you have nominees, or if you know you're going to be working with students that are doing research projects. It's great to kind of know what to expect before they actually start their research projects. So in terms of human participants, that's probably one of the bigger, more important types of research, I would say, that might require either pre-approvals by an institutional review board or a fair's scientific review committee. And typically for research involving human participants, those are things that, things such as a student designing a survey that they're then distributing, to their classmates or friends or family, testing of inventions, apps, prototypes on anyone other than the researcher. Those all count as research involving human participants. So an IRB and getting an IRB approval might sound a little complicated, but it's actually pretty straightforward to set one up at your school. When you look at our paperwork, we're essentially requiring 3 signatures, one from an educator, one from a school administrator, like a vice principal or principal, and one from a medical or mental health professional, and that can a lot of times be a school nurse. Um, in terms of exempt studies, those are anything that is observational in nature if the student is not manipulating or changing the environment or the subjects in any way. If a student is using survey data or other types of data that are publicly available, those are usually exempt studies. So again, not going into the super specifics here, but just calling out some of the things to look out for, particularly if if you're helping students really at the start of the year before they're starting their research project and entering in science fair. Research involving vertebrate animals also typically requires a pre-approval or pre-review. We want to make sure that pets are being kept safe. And then a big one that we see at the middle school level are research with potentially hazardous biological agents. So the big thing that I want to call out here is to please not have your students work with bacteria at home. Culturing of microorganisms at home is definitely prohibited. And most need to minimally be done at a BSL-1 pet level environment like a school lab. For more information on the rules, you can visit that ISEF link that we had on the previous page. And then we're also going to share a link later to an educators page that we have specifically for the Thermo Fisher JIC, where you can find a science fair paperwork guide that kind of highlights these main points as well. Again, ideally for you to look at, before a student completes their research in the fall. Now, in terms of what this means for the application and the paperwork that we're asking for in the application, we want any forms that your student might have filled out at their local science fair. This can be ISEF forms, but it's not required that our affiliated fairs use ISEF forms. You might be familiar with those if you know about high school students that are competing at the Regeneron ISEF. Several of our affiliated fairs do use those forms, but several also make some simpler forms for the middle school audience, and those are totally fine. If your student does not have access to forms, it might be because they just don't have copies anymore after competing at their local fair. They submitted them and never got any copies back, or they just didn't know that they had to do the forms. They don't need to fill out the forms post-fair. Instead, we have an option in the application to have the student submit a letter, and that letter should come from the adult that supervised and approved their research project. That can be you as a teacher or their fair director, but ideally just someone who knows what approval processes the student went through prior to completing their research and what safety measures were taken. Again, ultimately, we just want to make sure that your student was being safe and conducting ethical research. So now moving on to the application process, where I'm going to talk about each kind of task of the application as an overview. I'm not going to go into the application system itself, but you are welcome to create a test application in the system if you'd like. You can use the same fair password that your students are using. This should have already been emailed to you from us or from your fair. If you need example of what that password is, just email us and we're happy to give you access to the system. We just ask that if you do submit or do open a test application that you either don't submit it or let us know that you've created a test account just so that we can keep track of that on our end. There are about 6 or 7 tasks here, and all of them actually have a number next to them. But each of these tasks are required. And you can also find a full PDF of our application on our website, which we'll again link to in a little bit. The first task that is sometimes a hurdle for our students is confirming their FAIR password. So this is a 6-digit code just to confirm that the student has actually been nominated by one of our affiliated fairs. They should receive this from the fair. If not, we send this to the teachers of nominated students as well as their parent and guardian, just to help them get access to the application. They won't be able to see the rest of the tasks in the application until this FAIR password is entered correctly. So if a student does misenter their password or doesn't know it, they can email us at jic@societyforscience.org. You can email us as well as their teacher, and we can help find their right FAIR password so they can get access to the full application. So parts 1 and 2 really just ask a lot of basic information that the student can probably check off really quickly. It asks for contact information, demographic information, information about their school that they attend and teachers. They'll have to select their school from a drop-down menu. If their school isn't appearing in the list, they can email us at jic@societyforscience.org and get that added pretty quickly. So don't fret if you don't see your school listed in our system. We can definitely get that in for you. These two parts also ask questions about how a student conducted their research this year, whether or not they did their research as a part of a school requirement, if they have a school, a research program at their school or STEM clubs. And this is all really just to get more context about the students' research experiences this year. It's totally fine if a student did do a project required by a school. We know that happens a lot. Probably about 50% of our students that are entering were required to do a science fair project at their school, and that's totally fine. Again, it just gives a little bit more context for the student's project that they're describing. And I also just want to mention that though you can't see very well here, there is a progress bar at the top of each task. Some of these tasks in the application have 2 pages. So your student should scroll all the way down, make sure they're clicking and seeing next, and then hitting that mark as complete button when they finish a task. And that way it'll successfully save all of their answers. Part 3 is the project information task, and this is definitely the bulk of the application. So this section is really, we've tried to structure it like a judging interview. So it asks a bunch of different questions about the research, what they did, right? Starting with their research question, giving an abstract or summary through their methods, analysis, and their conclusions. At the start of this task, we also ask them to select a project category. They might need some help from you in determining what that category is. It's not always the same as, we don't have the same necessarily options as they might have had at their local science fair. We do link to a list of definitions for all of our project categories in this section. So they can use that to help them better understand which project category is their fit. But ultimately, what we tell the students is that they should choose whatever category matches the subject matter expertise that they want a reviewer to have that's going to review their project. The project information section also asks a little bit about who helped them. We know that particularly at the middle school level, it's not necessarily a solitary activity, right? Doing research. And that's totally okay. We want the student to be honest about where they worked, who might have helped them with their research project. We ask them about their inspiration for their research project. If they used something like science buddies, we give them the opportunity to tell us that. And that's, again, totally okay for them if they're using that as a starting point. A student might have then expanded on a question that they find online, right? And make that unique or original in some way. And that's what we're asking for in this part of the application. Teammates also have a chance to talk about how they divided work up amongst themselves. as well in part 3. The visual aid really goes hand in hand with part 3 of the application. This is a space to showcase their data that they collected in lieu of their project board, right? So what we don't want to see is an upload of their physical project board. It's not going to show up well in the online system. We want to make sure that whatever their student is uploading as their visual aid is readable at just 100% zoom without really having to zoom in a lot. And on the flip side, uploading a full digital poster that the student might have used at their local science fair with a lot of images crammed into it also is not going to read that well for the judges and evaluators. So we highly recommend limiting the visuals in your visual aid to 3 visuals per page, and you get a maximum of 2 pages. So just think ask your student to think about what figures, data, charts best represents their research, what they really want to highlight and showcase in the visual aid. Text on the visual aid should just be limited to captions, titles, labels and things like that. It should not include any additional essays or text, or along the lines of what they've already included in their application. And we don't share examples of the visual aid just because there are really so many different ways a student can tackle this. And we don't want to prescribe any one specific way so that a student feels like they need to change their materials completely, right? But if you do have questions about the visual aid or your student has questions about the visual aid that are more specific to them, they can always email us at jic@societyforscience.org. Moving on to part 4, which is our creative essays. So these essay questions, which we've copied and pasted here, the first 2, the student has 2 options to select from for about me and solve a problem. It does not matter which one they select. The about me questions are just a chance for students to express some creativity, showcase their values a little bit. For solve a problem, the evaluators are looking at how a student approaches a problem that they might not know a lot about. It's totally okay if a student, doesn't know about a lot about either one of these topics. They don't have to do a ton of research for it. It's really about how they might just approach a problem, right, that they don't know a lot about. And we hope that through this section, it's also a chance for the students to have a little bit of fun in terms of just writing about things that they might find interesting or enjoyable. We also ask for the student to tell us about their STEM journey. And this question is really asking about, how the student became interested in STEM or their research project, what resources were available to them. And similar to those questions in part 2, this is a chance for a student just to give any additional context in terms of how they conducted their research project this year. We also have an optional question for a student to share really anything else that they feel is super important to them and their personal selves with the judges. Some students feel they have a story, that is that they want to share that their application would just not be complete without. So they're invited to do so here, but it's truly optional. Whenever you see a student sees optional questions in the application, they shouldn't feel obligated to answer them. All right, our last few sections here. Part 5 is the personal interest. This is another section that can get done really quickly. It's just asking for what extracurriculars the students are involved in, any volunteering that they do, really just asking for more about their interests outside of the research. And while the evaluators and judges do look at this section, it's primarily used by our communications team if a student advances to the top 300 or finalist stage. It helps our communications team just tell a more well-rounded story about a student in terms of what they do outside of their STEM passions. In terms of science fair paperwork, we talked a little bit about this before, but there are several questions in this section that just allow the student to tell us more about how they conducted their research, what safety measures they were taking, who was supervising them while they were conducting their research, So just trying to give, all opportunities for a student to tell us about the ways they were being safe. They can definitely email us if they have questions about specifics with their forms and paperwork and what they should be applying. You can as well as a teacher. We definitely want to make sure we're trying to support students who might be confused by the process, because it can be a little bit difficult. And lastly, the parent guardian permission form, pretty straightforward, but a student might ask for your help with converting this and other uploads into PDFs. Our application system, we just need to collect a lot of the uploads as PDFs. There is guidance in the application as to how to do that, but that is something that you as a teacher can certainly help with. In terms of what resources we have for students, we have quite a few. We have webinars that we do live throughout the spring that we've already started up on our YouTube channel. You can also see webinars from past years that have good advice from alumni, for example, talk about the top 10 tips that we have for nominees as they complete the application. You can find all of those on our YouTube channel. We also have section by section overviews of each task of the application that walk through a little bit more in detail than what I just did in terms of each question in a particular task and how best to answer them. In terms of some tips and troubleshooting that you can do or that we can provide you to help your students. One, we definitely encourage you to encourage your students to apply early. It's definitely best if they start the application right when they receive a nomination. That way their project is still really fresh in their minds. They've just had judging interviews. They know how to describe it. So the sooner they start that application, after receiving a nomination, the better. We definitely recommend starting with parts 1, 2, or 5. Again, these are the quick kind of tasks that they can easily knock off. If you add the parent permission form to that, that's already half the tasks just done straight out the gate. Encourage your students to submit by the deadline or ideally well before. After a student submits, they can still edit their application. So it's not going to lock them out if they submit the application. And if they submit early, that means that they're, definitely we have their application. We recommend doing that just in case there are any technical difficulties, right? You don't want to find out that something's going wrong the day of the deadline. Better to do that ahead of time. That being said, we definitely have had students every year open applications and submit on that last deadline day itself. So it can be done. We want students to be honest about their answers. What we always say for this competition, particularly at the middle school level, is that it doesn't have to be the most sophisticated research done at high-end lab. At the middle school level, a lot of these projects are homegrown. They're students are doing them at their school or in their backyard, and that's totally fine. A student's understanding of the project goes far, and so no need to make false claims, right, about your research. And it kind of goes in with the next point that answers should be in students' words, but it's okay for you as an adult, as their teacher, to review their project. In fact, we encourage, proofreading, making sure the students' ideas are kind of clear and they can be the ones to go back and edit after you've reviewed. We encourage students, if they're feeling stumped, to try answering the questions out loud. Again, those questions in part 3 about their project are really designed to hopefully feel like a judging interview, which they've had experience with at their local fair. So talking out loud and recording that response might help them just jumpstart the writing process. We know that as middle school students, this might be the first time that they're really filling out an in-depth application and writing. All of those responses can seem daunting. So hopefully this is a tip that helps break that down a little bit more for them. Speaking of the responses and it feeling daunting, We have word limits on each of our questions. The student certainly does not have to fill the word limit for any particular question. If they write a short, succinct answer, that's definitely fine. They don't have to feel obligated to use the full maximum word limit that we have. I kind of talked about this already, but just explaining why the judges really want to see that the students understand why they did what they did in terms of their research project, why they use certain methods, why they chose certain variables. So keep that in mind as the student is doing, is particularly filling out part 3 of the application. We also have an application planner that we encourage our nominees to use. This comes in the digital nominee packet that they should have received from AFAIR. We also send it out when we're emailing you as their teachers and their parents and guardians. If a student has not gotten this, they can email us at JIC at societyforscience.org, and we're happy to send it along. But what we hope this planner helps the students do is just break down the application into manageable chunks. And gives them a way to kind of celebrate at each step of the way as well. So speaking of celebrating, once a student has actually completed and submitted their application, definitely encourage you to celebrate that achievement. It's a huge accomplishment. They did a lot of work just on their research project and then following that through with completing the application. So we definitely want to make sure they feel recognized for their hard work. So just to kind of wrap things up as to, why should your student apply? Like I mentioned before, students are celebrated at each step of the competition. We know that middle school is a really critical time for students. We want them to feel encouraged to continue their passions for STEM and their scientific research, no matter what the outcome is of a competition. At the end of the day, it is a competition and not everyone can advance. But the fact that they earned a nomination already is a huge honor. They're the top 10% of 6th, 7th, and 8th graders in the country participating in science fairs. And then entrants, if they actually submit their application by the deadline, entrants receive prize packages like we mentioned. There's the lotteries that we have for other prizes, and there's society alumni, which can really open doors for future connections down the road. The application is also a great way for them to practice their writing and communication skills as they continue through high school and beyond. That's just a skill that's going to be more and more in practice. So this is a great start for them to get some practice with that early on. They've already done the hard part. They've already done their science fair project and competed at the local level. And the application is really just asking, follow-up questions almost in terms of what they did, right? So they have really nothing to lose, and that's the last point here. We have so many alumni that come back on these webinars that we do, or just tell us in person how they had no idea, that they would go as far as they did. And the biggest thing that we can say is just to try. They have what it takes by earning that nomination. And so there's really nothing to lose. And we hope that they take advantage of the opportunities available. So just to recap some important dates, the application is now open. It closes on June 12th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. The top 300 junior innovators are announced on September 4th, and the finalists are announced on September 18th this year. Finals week is going to be here in DC from October 25th through October 30th. And on October 26th, we will hold a science and engineering project showcase. And that's a day where the public is invited to come and hear directly from the finalists about their research. We also do a virtual component as well that we'll be posting up on our website. That's a great resource if you're looking to get more students involved in STEM research at your school. We highly recommend checking out that page for project ideation. And I'll link to that in just a second. So here are our resources for educators. I definitely recommend taking a picture or screenshotting this. Our main application homepage. We have this for educators page that has the PDF of the application. If you want to check it out, it has that science for paperwork guide I mentioned, has our official rules for you to check out as well. If you're curious about finding an affiliated fair in your area, most of you probably know that the science fair in your area is already affiliated or not. But in case if you don't or want to share this with colleagues, you can go to our Find a Fair website. And then I also want to give a shout out to an upcoming opportunity that we have for middle school teachers. Each year, the Society for Science hosts a middle school research teachers conference, and the lottery for that is now open. That conference is going to be held in the summertime in, I think, mid or early July. And it's really an opportunity for you to learn more about how to support students in STEM and science competitions. It brings together teachers from all over the country with varying levels of expertise in supporting students through research and through competitions. So it's a great place to just continue to learn, again, how to support your students or share your wisdom. And that lottery closes on May 17th. All right, so now we're going to take some questions if there are any. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second. All right, looks like we don't have any questions coming through, which is totally fine. If you do have any questions that come to mind after this webinar ends, you can always email us at jic@societyforscience.org. I'll put this screen back up really quick. That is our email, and that is our website again. Thank you all so much for joining us and taking time out of your busy lives as teachers to find more ways to support your students. Like I said, you can always email us and we're here to help. So thank you for doing all that you do and have a good night.